I'm Dr. Jane Adler, co-author of Realizing the Promise and developer of the Accelerated Transition to Meaningful Use system. In this brief video, you'll discover the 5 most expensive mistakes physicians make in adopting electronic records. Now, I don't need to tell you that the current rate of EHR disappointments and failures is unacceptably high. Failure rates of 35 to 50% are common, with some experts claiming the failure rate is as high as 73%. Of course, that depends on how you define failure. But does it really matter? After all, if it's your EHR project that drags on, that runs way over budget, reduces your productivity, frustrates your staff, or puts your financial solvency at risk, in other words, if it's your practice that runs into trouble with your EHR transition, the failure rate might as well be 100%. The 5 most expensive mistakes I'll tell you about are responsible for a significant percentage of these EHR disappointments and failures. Knowing what they are and how to avoid them will increase your odds of a rapid and successful EHR transition. Now, before I get into what the 5 most expensive mistakes are, I need to let you know 2 things. First, these aren't just my perspective. They are the results of thousands of hours and millions of dollars spent by researchers investigating EHR adoption. This research has been published in peer-reviewed journals and in reports from the American Academy of Family Practice's Center for Health Information Technology. The problem is, to a large extent, these findings have not yet filtered out to the physicians who need them the most. But it's critical that you get this information and that you get it right away. Why the urgency? Not only because so many physicians are running into trouble with their transitions, not only because the clock is ticking on qualifying for Stage 1 meaningful use payments, but because of the new, even more pressing reasons for rapid EHR adoption. And these include the recent decisions by Aetna, United Health, WellPoint, and Highmark that they will align their payment programs with meaningful use of electronic records, as well as the recent announcements by the American Board of Medical Specialties and the Federation of State Licensing Boards that they too will incorporate EHR use into their guidelines for recertification and license renewal. Another thing you need to know, and this may surprise you, is that selecting the wrong system is not one of these top 5 mistakes. Of course, it is possible to waste time and money on a system that just isn't right for your practice. But research shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that the majority of the time, when EHR implementations run over time and over budget, when they lead to extended productivity slowdowns, and when they cause problems in the practice, the technology is not the major source of the problem. Instead, problems most frequently result from how the EHR system is implemented and how it is used or not used by the clinical and non-clinical staff. Now, let's move on to expensive mistake number 1, and that is taking too long with your EHR transition. Needless to say, you're not going to transition to an EHR system from paper charts overnight, but the process doesn't need to take as long as many people think. In fact, there are some very real and expensive dangers to letting your transition drag on. There's a huge misconception out there that it takes 9 to 18 months, sometimes even longer, for a practice to transition to electronic records. But the fact is, that's just not the case. So where did this misconception come from? Well, first, it's the experience of hospitals. Major hospitals were among the earliest adopters of electronic record systems. But while it makes sense that a hospital with multiple departments, ICUs, and hundreds to thousands of employees to train would need many months to even years to make the transition, your practice doesn't need to take anywhere near as long. The second source of this misconception is the belief that you have to move all of the information in all of your paper charts into the electronic record. But that's just not the case. You only need to transfer relevant information, things like medications, problem lists, allergies, and relevant history. You only need that for your currently active patients, and only just in time for their next appointment. That's so you can effectively document the visit in the EHR And that's even if you want to qualify fully for Stage 1 incentives under the Meaningful Use program. The problem with these misconceptions is that they lead physicians to accept lengthy transition times as normal and acceptable. But research clearly shows that taking too long with any major project, like an EHR transition, can jeopardize the project's ultimate success. If you allow your EHR transition to take too long, project fatigue can easily set in when your staff members don't see progress being made. They lose energy, motivation, and confidence. As a result, the project slows even more. Everyone gets frustrated, workflow and patient flow is disrupted for an unnecessarily long period, and this can reduce your practice revenues significantly. So to recap, expensive mistake number 1 is allowing your EHR transition to take too long. And the solution is to have a clear transition plan, one with milestones and accountability. A plan that moves your practice rapidly and cost-effectively to complete adoption. Expensive mistake number 2 is doing too much yourself or having any provider on your staff do too much to manage and coordinate your EHR project. As physicians and practice owners, it's natural for us to want to oversee a project that will have a huge impact on our patients and our bottom lines. But when you spend your time on things you don't have to do, several problems occur. The project can't move ahead quickly because everyone feels they need to check with you first. It reduces the time you have for patient care. This reduces practice revenues and makes it more difficult for you to pay for more help if you should need it. At the same time, turning responsibility for your entire EHR project over to someone outside your practice can be a huge and expensive mistake. First, no one knows the details of how your practice operates the way you and your staff do. It would take a consultant weeks to months to learn what your staff members already know. And second, when you put an outsider in charge of something as all-encompassing as your EHR transition, it can easily lead to staff resistance. Extensive research in change management, especially the management of big IT projects, reveals that involving employees in every step of the implementation process is critical to building their support and commitment. What you need is a system for balancing outside advisory services with internal management of your EHR transition by your own practice staff. This enables you to benefit from a consultant's insight and experience without paying an outsider to do things that your staff members can do more efficiently. So to recap, expensive mistake number 2 is trying to manage too much of your EHR project on your own. And the solution is to use a system that balances outside advisory services with internal management of your EHR transition by your own practice staff. Expensive mistake number 3 is beginning documentation at the wrong point in your EHR transition. If you begin documenting visits too early and patient data isn't already in the EHR, you won't have all the information you need when you need it. You'll need to look in multiple places in order to document a patient visit. That slows you down and reduces practice revenue. Even worse, having some patient information in the paper chart and some in the electronic record can easily lead to clinical oversights and costly mistakes. Of course, waiting too long to begin documenting patient visits isn't a good idea either. As I mentioned in mistake number 1, research has found that if your transition takes too long, it can jeopardize the success of the entire project. So to recap, expensive mistake number 3 is beginning your patient documentation at the wrong point in your EHR transition. And the solution is to follow an implementation strategy that pinpoints the precise time in your EHR transition to begin your patient documentation. Expensive mistake number 4 is taking the wrong approach to training. Many practice owners invest a great deal of time and money in staff training, only to find after all of this that the system is still not functioning the way they want it to. At this point, it's natural to blame the system or even the trainers, but the problem is often something very different. It's the lack of an effective training strategy. While there are several critical elements to an effective training strategy, elements that are frequently overlooked, one of the least obvious yet most problematic is the importance of not giving too much training. Although we have seen practices where providers and staff have been given too little training to use the system, what we see far more frequently is the providers and staff are overloaded and that training sessions are longer and not as focused as they need to be. The problem with giving people more training than they need to perform well in their work is that it wastes money, it takes them away from their jobs for a prolonged period, and it can keep them from developing proficiency with the skills they really need because their attention and focus is scattered. When staff members don't develop proficiency, they don't use the EHR system, or they use the system incorrectly, or they use the EHR only partially, leading to a dangerous dual system of paper charts and an electronic record. This leads to some very costly results. Practice productivity drops, patients become frustrated by the inefficiency, and lack of staff proficiency with the system leads to costly errors in billing, coding, reporting, and even in patient care. Unfortunately, most practice owners and even trainers try to solve this problem the wrong way, with more training. That only makes things worse. While this is just one example of an ineffective training strategy, it's easy to see from this alone how you and your staff can become stuck in a cycle of costly and repetitive retraining and increasing frustration and pessimism. So to recap, expensive mistake number 4 is taking the wrong approach to training. And the solution is to avoid a one-size-fits-all training strategy and to use a training strategy that provides the precise amount of information you and each of your staff members need to rapidly achieve proficiency with your EHR system and to get to meaningful use. Expensive mistake number 5 is expecting too much from your vendor. Now I know that saying this isn't going to make me very popular. The popular thing to do is to bash vendors when we don't get the results we want from their products. But according to the research, EHR disappointments, problems, and failures are most often due to issues inside the practices and not to problems with the technology products or with the vendor service and support. And when you think about it, this only makes sense. Practically every EHR vendor out there can provide you with multiple success stories. Yet when you ask around, chances are good that you will find more than one practice that has failed with the very same system. So what that means is that there's more to a successful EHR transition than simply selecting the right system and relying on your vendor for everything else. Your vendor can provide a quality product and best practices on how to use it. Your vendor can get the EHR system and peripherals installed in your practice, and your vendor can provide you and your staff with technical training and support. But your vendor can't build the kind of staff motivation and collaboration that you need to get the system functioning well for your practice. Your vendor can't delegate the details of the project to specific staff members. There's no way for your vendor to maintain accountability that your staff does what they need to do when they need to do it. Your vendor can't determine the best training strategy for your practice, and your vendor can't possibly ensure that you and your staff will use the EHR system in the right way so that you rapidly achieve meaningful use. So to recap, expensive mistake number 5 is expecting too much from your vendor. And the solution is to go beyond what your vendor offers and get the support you need to guide your practice quickly and cost-effectively to meaningful use. Regardless which EHR system you choose or where you are in your transition process, NeoVista Health's Accelerated Transition to Meaningful Use system can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be. Our certified ATMU consultants provide EHR implementation advice and support while helping you keep costs down and productivity up throughout your transition. When you use an ATMU certified consultant, you'll have a clear transition plan, one with milestones and accountability. A plan that moves your practice as rapidly and cost-effectively as possible to meaningful use. For information on bringing the Accelerated Transition to Meaningful Use system to your practice or to your physician clients, and a downloadable copy of the Accelerated Transition to Meaningful Use Action Map, please fill out the form below or visit our website, neovistahealth.com.